Now, friends, let me ask you this morning, in light of our passage, let me also ask you this. Are you comfortable with asking people for help? In other words, when you find yourself in a situation and you realize you need help, are you somebody that has no problem asking for help? Or are you somebody that's typically hesitant to help? You know, I would argue that a lot of us here today, we probably have a hard time asking for help. And the reason it's hard, oftentimes, is because we convince ourselves that we should not be asking for help. How many times have you thought some of these things, like, oh, I don't want to bother them. They're so busy. Or I don't want to inconvenience them, or I don't want to burden them. Or have you said this one before? You know, I just don't think that they'll understand what I'm going through. Or even worse, I just don't think that they'll care. Or how about this one? You said, you know, I don't want to ask them because I don't want them to think that I'm using them. Or maybe you've asked this one straight up before. You know what? I'm not going to ask because I don't want to come across as weak and incompetent. I mean, quite frankly, I should know how to handle this on my own. You know, one time, about 10 years ago, I was working on a college campus, and I was moving offices from one building to the other. And I had this cart of all my stuff. I had sort of balanced it on this cart, and I'm rolling along. And I get to the new building. There's this huge bump right before you go into the building. And I'm looking at this bump, and I'm looking at the cart, and I'm thinking, I don't know about this. And meanwhile, one of my coworkers, he's sitting on a bench over here scrolling through his phone, and my initial thought was, hey, I should ask my coworker for help. But then you know what my second thought was? Oh, come on, Chris. You don't need help. You got this. And so I took the cart. I brought some momentum. I got it over the bump, but it got stuck on the bump, and then everything fell off the cart. Boxes came open. Paper started flying with the wind. There was a mug that shattered into pieces. This was in the middle of a college campus. Students were walking by. Here I am with all this mess. And my coworker who was sitting scrolling on his phone, he came over, started helping me pick it up and get it ready. And friends, the most frustrating part about that whole thing is that nothing like that would have happened if I had simply asked my coworker for help. You see, friends, sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we could really use some help, and as difficult and as awkward and as frustrating as it can be, sometimes we need to be willing to ask for that help.